Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is all about doing an FTP test, which I will get into and explain a little bit more about shortly. But I thought in this video, usually I do like a lot of B-roll and try and make a quite nice looking video, I suppose. But this one I'm going to do slightly differently. And I'm basically just going to play the FTP test, watch it along with you on my laptop, and basically just talk over it and explain a little bit about what an FTP test is. I'm not by any means like a coach or know a lot about this stuff, but from what I understand, I'll give a bit of an example as to what it is. I'll also talk through why I'm doing it and sort of the reasons behind doing a test now, and what sort of the numbers will give me going forward, and basically, yeah, why I'm doing it. And then also you'll be able to see the result that I get as an age group athlete. So to give a little bit of backstory about myself, last year I got into triathlon at the start of last year, got a coach, built up to doing an Ironman, did an Ironman in June or July last year, I can't actually remember. It was out on Nottingham basically last year. Went really well, did it in 10.5 hours, 10:36 or 37 or something like that for my first one. Since that Ironman, I ended up stopping coaching, and I've had very unstructured and not so good training since. But recently sort of getting back into the game a bit and getting a bit more solid training under my belt. Looking towards next season, where I'm going to hopefully have a slightly better season than I did this year, because I basically didn't race. So that's the plan anyway. Yeah, let's get into it and start watching the video, and I can carry on rambling. Also, if you do like this sort of style of video, let me know in the comments. I might be able to do a few more of them. So whilst we're watching this, I think the first thing that I'll talk about is, well, what is an FTP test? Basically, if you don't know, I'm assuming you probably do if you've clicked this video, but if you don't, it's basically a way of measuring your functional threshold power. That's what FTP stands for. What is your functional threshold power? Well, obviously power is measured in watts on the bike, and it's basically supposedly meant to be it's sort of the threshold of what you can hold as your like max output for an hour. Not that I actually know many people have tried to hold their FTP for an hour, because it seems a little bit unrealistic, possibly. But that's the idea of it. It's meant to give you your function. You're basically meant to give you the max amount of watts that you can output for an hour. Why do you do an FTP test? Well, this gives you sort of a baseline number to then plan workouts in, basically. So if you know that your FTP is 250 watts, then you know that potentially your zone 3 sort of tempo work, your sub-threshold work could be, right before sub-threshold. So like I say, your tempo work could be 200 watts, and then you know that your sort of sweet spot effort, so you're sort of just below threshold, would be maybe 230 watts, and then your threshold power would be 250 watts. So that's where it starts to get, quite a bit harder. And then from there, your sort of max effort, your VO2 max effort is then anything above your FTP value. So it would be anything over 250 watts. And it's basically, just there to help you kind of plan in and sort of work out training going forward to get the best out of yourself. So that brings me on to, why did I do an FTP test at this time? Well, basically, last week, if you've ever watched some of my videos before, you'll know that I was meant to be racing on Sunday, which would have been 2 days ago. I found out that race was cancelled. I somehow didn't get the email, not sure how or why, but I didn't get the email, which is a little bit frustrating because I did start tapering last week for the race. But anyway, that was going to be my last race, or one of my only races, I suppose, of this season. It didn't go ahead, so switched up the plan, ended up having just an easier sort of week last week. And then this week is basically the start of my winter block going into next season. By winter block, I mean you basically start with like a base phase of training, so you work on your aerobic fitness. And at the start of this winter block, it's good to basically retest everything, so you've got your correct zones, your correct FTP value to plan workouts, your correct running zones, your heart rate zones. Basically, you've got all the numbers that you need to then plan everything going forward into next season. So it's a good time to basically test. So that's why basically why I've done the FTP test at this time, is because now I'm going to go into a winter block of training. It's good to know exactly where my fitness is now, to then plan and basically get, like I said a minute ago, to get the max out of myself going forward. And I'm not, when I'm trying to do a sweet spot effort on the bike, I know I'm not pushing too hard or not pushing enough. I'm doing exactly what I need to do. So that's why you do these sort of tests, and it's a brilliant time to do it. Just quickly moving on to where I am now. I'm at about 320 watts. My heart rate, let's talk about this as well, because at the start you would have noticed around the 260 watt mark, my heart rate was like, it was basically high. It might have been in the 180s there. For me, I've got an extremely high heart rate. You'll see towards the end of this video how high it actually gets. This is off a watch heart rate monitor as well, so I don't know how accurate it is, but I've got a very, I've not seen anyone with a higher heart rate than me before. So my zones, it looks like I'm pushing really hard, but I'm not. Like, my heart rate's really high, and this is a lot harder than it is. It is hard, obviously, but it's, yeah, because I've got such a high heart rate, it looks a lot harder. It looks like I'm pushing a lot harder than I actually am. But I was quite nervous going into this, so my heart rate was actually higher than it should have been. I think it's probably quite common. You get like adrenaline, and you know you're going to have to put out a solid effort, so your heart rate tends to spike quite a bit more. So I'm at 340 watts, and my heart rate's 197 beats per minute, 198 now. That is high. My max heart rate that I've ever seen, which was on a run, was 216 beats per minute. That was only once as well, but I can quite comfortably get my heart rate over 200 beats per minute. So this is definitely starting to pinch here. 360 watts. I started feeling the effort at around 300 watts. That's when I was like, oof, this is getting tough. So 360 watts is definitely starting to push it now. My heart rate's well over 200, 202 beats per minute, just seen. Cadence is quite high. Usually I prefer having a cadence a little bit lower. I come from a bit more of a strength background and a lot of strength training, so doing heavy squats and deadlifts, heavy-ish. I'm not actually that heavy, but so I like to push quite a low cadence. But here, you know, my legs are on fire, so I kind of had to push a higher cadence just to try and keep the pedals turning. And I was worried that if I lowered the cadence down too much to, usually I'm around like 80 to 85. If I lowered it anywhere there, then it could quite easily come down to 75, and I wouldn't be able to basically keep on top of the gear. So I was like, push a higher cadence as I possibly can to keep over the gear and not, because once it drops below like 75, it's going to be so hard to get it back up again. But if I'm at 95 and it drops to 85, I can quite easily get it back up again. 380 now, and this is where it was really starting to hurt, and I was digging deep. You can probably tell by my face. It's yeah, this is really starting to pinch. And 205, that is now getting high for me. 206, I rarely see it that high, especially on the bike. 207, yeah, this is really starting to hurt now. But my kind of, where my FTP has been recently, I've been aiming, I haven't done a test in ages as well, in over a year and a half probably. So my FTP, I was thinking was around 300 watts. So that's where all my FTP sort of intervals have been recently. So I knew that if I hit 400 watts for the minute, I should have explained that. Basically, the way this ramp test works is you increase, every 20 seconds you increase your watts, every minute you increase your watts by 20 until you basically can't go anymore. And then based off that, the highest average minute that you get from that, from the test, is you times it by 0.75, so 75% of that is your FTP. So I knew if I hit 400 watts that my FTP would be 300. So now I'm at 210 beats per minute, which is very high for the bike. It is now hurting a lot. My cadence is 102, which is high for me, and I'm struggling at this point. I was kind of hoping that I could get past the 400 and maybe squeeze in the 420. I started it off here, but my heart rate is 211 beats per minute, which is very high. That might even be the highest I've ever seen it on the bike. And I was really trying here, but it hurt. you can tell because my watts sort of fluctuates a bit, so I kind of drop down to 414 and go back up to 425. And also I hit a point, it was around probably a few minutes ago, or a few seconds ago, where I felt my cadence really drop, and then I was like, I had to push again massively to try and get it back up, and then I just, as soon as I tried to push up again, I was like, oh, I can't, my legs are done. And there, yeah. So I think my highest average was maybe 409 or something like that for the minute, around there. And it basically ended up giving me an FTP of around 311 watts, which I was happy with, considering I've not had the best training this year, not had much structured training. Just, yeah, I've also had injuries recently, so again, haven't been able to do much structured training, or just, yeah, haven't had any real solid block of training this year. So to have 311 watts, it's a perfect value for me going forward, and I know that's where my fitness is at now. So going forward, all my intervals and any sort of workouts that I do now, I've got that in mind, that's basically where I'm at, and I can build from that and hopefully get that up a little bit higher going into next season. Yeah, I was absolutely dying here. And then I just basically do a little bit of a cool down. Let me pause that there. Cool. Something I did find actually whilst I'm mentioning this about cool down is what was a little bit weird is I finished the test, and within about, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes, I felt not fully recovered. I still could feel a lot of lactic blood and stuff in my legs, but almost felt, not that I could go again, but I could definitely have done another interval or done a bit more, I think. And it's hard to know whether during the test, could you have pushed a bit more? Could you have done an extra 10 seconds, which would have bumped your thing up, or your FTP up? Or could you have gone and stretched it out to that last minute? By, 2 or 3 minutes after, I was thinking, oh, I've still got something in my legs. But, if you stop there, you stop there. And that's what your body tells you at that time. So I assume, it's got to be correct. You always think you can push a bit more after, didn't you? You always reflect and go, should I put in a bit more effort? But yeah, anyway, that's going to be the video. FTP of 311 watts going forward. That's going to be where my base is, and hopefully we can build from that, as I mentioned. That's probably going to end up being quite a long video, so I'm going to stop it here. But I hope you enjoyed that, and like I say, if you did enjoy this sort of style of video where I'm sort of talking through what's happening a little bit and explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, then let me know in the comments, and I can potentially do a little bit more of this sort of stuff. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave me any comments or what your FTP is, and what, if you've done a recent test, how you found it. Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next time for some more triathlon related content.